right, everyone. It is good to see you. How was the lunch? Did you enjoy that? So, as you've been coming night by night, you have seen that one of our sponsors is Ezekiel. This is the bag that amazing bread comes in. Ezekiel 4:9. Let me turn it the right way. Ezekiel 4:9. It is a sprouted grain bread, so the glycemic index is very, very different from any other type of bread. So when you're at the store, look for Ezekiel 4:9 bread. It is truly an incredible thing. They have a big lineup of different things. One of my favorites is their raisin bread, but they also have bagels. They even, depending on what store you go to, they have some tortillas, and it's all sprouted, organic, incredibly healthy bread. The other thing I wanted to mention is that someone lost this nice pink cup. Is that anyone here? Is anyone in the auditorium right now missing a pink tumbler? Nope? All right. Well, we'll make another announcement after a bit. But again, we are very thankful that you have chosen to be here with us for this wonderful experience of Unlock Your Health. And that is our goal, to help you, whatever stage you are in life, whatever your challenges are. We want you to go to the next level and experience abundant health. That is what we definitely want. So if you have any questions at any time, please text them here to this phone number, 951-330-4325. That's 951-330-HEAL. That's what it spells, 4325. And so we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this particular session. I want to encourage those of you who are coming in right now, please come down closer to the front. If you can, that would be great. Thank you so much. And again, we want to also thank our sponsors for this event. We have Health Education Resources. We have the Homeland Seventh-day Adventist Church and Food for Life Bakery, as I mentioned. And so these different supporters have done different things to make this event possible. Have you enjoyed the venue? Has it been good to be here at the high school? We really have enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a beautiful place, and we're planning already for follow-up programs, which I'll talk more about at the end of our time together. But once again, I want to thank you for coming to Unlock Your Health. Make sure that you have your notebooks ready, because yesterday we were definitely preparing for the MCAT. Isn't that right, Dr. Schwelt? Yeah, it was so good. What I really appreciate about Dr. Schwelt is that he takes very cutting-edge research, amazing, deep medical terms, and makes it very practical. Isn't that right? Haven't you appreciated that? So Dr. Schwelt, again, we want to thank you for being with us. Let me have a prayer, and we're going to get started. Father in heaven, thank you very much for the opportunity that we have to learn about our amazing human bodies. Thank you for everyone who's here. Once again, I pray for those who are on their way. Guide us, bless us, and help us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, well, welcome. You guys are the remnant at the end, right? That you've had punishment, and you're here for more punishment. All right, well, today we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about circadian rhythm, and that's going to be about an hour. And that'll also include fasting, because fasting goes along with circadian rhythm and when we eat and things of that nature. We might sort of go over a little bit of the things that we've talked about before. And then the second hour is going to be something that's going to be very special. It's probably the sort of the crowning jewel of all of the talks that we've talked about. Why is it that we're talking about these things, and what is the effect of it, and where are we going to go with this? And is this new information? Is this the first generation on this planet that has learned all of these things? Or has this been sort of something that we've always known, but maybe we've forgotten it? And don't miss this, because I'm sure that for most of you, you would never have seen this before. Okay, so this is a hospital lobby in India. Do you notice how bright it is? It's amazingly bright, and it's because they're starting to understand, and most of the world is starting to understand, the importance of light. So I'm trying to bring some of this stuff back into the fold here because we're going to review some of these things. So every one of you has a circadian rhythm. If you don't believe me, when you get on a flight and you go fly halfway across the world, you'll soon figure out that you have a circadian rhythm that is put into your mind. So if you could imagine, there's a clock that is ticking up in your mind, and it's always looking for cues to make sure that things happen on time. Again, forgive me, but I love this analogy of my friend in high school who used to work at Disneyland. Disneyland is a finely tuned operation, okay? During the day, they have people riding all of the rides. They have people going to the gift shop. They're purchasing. They have everything down to a T. Even Mickey Mouse has to make sure he leaves the park before he takes the head off, because that would be the absolute worst sin, is to see that someone was actually behind the mask of Mickey Mouse, right? But, as I said, for that to be regenerated the next day, there is a whole army of people that come in. Think about this. People who are scraping the gum off the streets, people who are planting new flowers, weeding the planters, making sure that the cash registers are checked out, making sure that the gift shop is restocked. Okay, now imagine what would happen. Imagine what would happen if the people, let's say the engineers who are working on, let's say, Space Mountain, probably one of the most exciting rides there in the park where you go and you whip around inside of a dark room. Let's just say that they decided to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and shut down the ride. Would that be a good thing? Would people be kind of upset that they didn't get to ride? Do you see what I'm saying? So here's the point, is that there are processes in your body that go on at certain times because it is optimal for those things to go on at those times. There are two major periods of time in your body. There are times when your body is building, and there are times when your body is breaking down, okay? During the day is when you are building. You're eating, you're getting fuel, things are being built, you're exercising, and then, do any of you live in a home where sometimes things break and you got to replace them? A light bulb, okay? Maybe the toaster oven. Oh, the washing machine is broke down after 15 years. Can you imagine what would happen to your house if you never got rid of anything? It just accumulated. Bad things break. Would this be a good running household? It would not. And so it's extremely important that your body have the opportunity to find things that are broken, get rid of them, so the next cycle you can build it back better. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is exactly what happens in real life, and this is why we have a circadian rhythm. You may not realize this, but there are certain times of the day, based on your circadian rhythm, when you are better at doing things than at other times. For instance, your best coordination is right about now at 2:30 in the afternoon. This is the time. If you want to do something, this is what you need to do. The fastest reaction time is around 3:30 in the afternoon. Your greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength is at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Folks, I'm a pulmonologist. I do pulmonary function tests for patients, and actually my respiratory therapist does this. We know that if we were to do the same test in the morning that we did in the afternoon, the results would be slightly different, but very statistically significantly different, okay? It's because our body is different. Our highest blood pressure is around 6:30 in the evening. Our highest body temperature is around 7 o'clock at night. And then as 9 o'clock starts to roll around and it's time to go to sleep, melatonin from the pineal gland starts to be secreted, and it tells our body it's time to go to bed, sleep, whatever you want to fill in the blank there, right? And what is it that can inhibit that like that? What is it that can inhibit melatonin secretion? Any kind of light. Any kind of light. Bowel movements get suppressed at 10:30 in the evening. Probably a good thing, right? You're supposed to be in bed. And then midnight, your deepest sleep is around 2 in the morning, and then your temperature of your body gets the lowest at about 4:30 in the morning. And then guess what happens as the sun starts to come up and you go out? Your sharpest rise in blood pressure is at 6:45. Good thing too, because you need to get up and out of bed. And you don't want to be falling, and when you get out of bed, right, from dizziness. Melatonin secretion stops. Bowel movement's likely at 8:30 in the morning. This is where a lot of people have a bowel movement. Highest testosterone secretion is around 9 o'clock in the morning. Your highest alertness is around 10 in the morning, and the cycle goes around and around and around. By the way, do you know when your body is the most sensitive to insulin? Is it in the morning or is it in the evening? It's in the morning. It's in the morning. That means your insulin, its ability to do what it does, is most powerful in the morning. We'll talk more about that as we go on. Here's the part that I want you to understand is this melatonin secretion starts here at the evening at 9 o'clock at night. And I want you to think about two hormones that are very important for you. And they are opposites. They are opposites. Melatonin secretion starts at around 9 o'clock at night, and cortisol starts to be at its peak around, I would say, about 8 hours later. Okay, 8 to 9 hours later, maybe 10 hours later. And 10 hours from 9 o'clock would be around 7 o'clock in the morning. So right here. So cortisol in the morning and melatonin in the evening. Those are extremely different hormones, and they have very different consequences. Okay, so I want you to think of the clock up in your head as the conductor of this orchestra. These are all of the processes that are going on in your body, okay? You've got the string section, you've got the cellos, you've got the brass, okay? In your body, you have genes that are doing this, that, and the other. And the circadian rhythm is the master clock that conducts this all from happening. So you don't have the gardener showing up at It's a Small World gardening in the middle of the day. So you don't have yourself going to the gift shop, but there's nothing to buy. So that you want to go ride Space Mountain and they have it shut down looking for, do you see what I'm saying? These things need to be timed effectively. And if you don't time these things effectively, if you mess up your circadian rhythm, are you going to have an optimal experience at Disneyland? No. Is your body going to be optimal? What happens when your body's not optimal? Chronic disease, cancers, etc., etc., etc. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so this is really important that we understand this situation, okay? So, here is the major pathway. Here is your brain. Do you remember this from the 1980s? Here's your brain. Here's your brain on drugs. Remember that? Any questions? Yeah, maybe I'm just a product of the 1980s. Here's your brain. Here's the pineal gland. And here's this melatonin that it's making. And this melatonin is the most powerful antioxidant known to man. It's even more powerful than glutathione. It gets secreted and your body is like, oh, thank you. Thank you, because now you can mop up all of the oxidative stress that has occurred throughout the day, okay? And so what is it that stops melatonin from being secreted? Light. Okay, so here's the SCN. This is the master clock, and it's attached directly to your eye. In other words, the clock, you know, you ever have those clocks? You have to pull the arms out at the back, and you got to twist the arms, and they move around. Okay, the clock is just like that in your brain. And what changes the dial back there, there's two things that will change the dial on that clock. Two things that will adjust the clock. Number one is light, and number two is food. Someone's listening. You guys are ready. So these are the two things that can actually impact what it is doing. So this is what happens. Now watch this. Light comes into your eye and goes to the back of the retina. It stimulates something called the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Say that 10 times fast. Intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or IPRGCs, who have peak sensitivity in the blue area. And it goes back here to the SCN, and the SCN will say, aha, there is light. And if there is light, it must be day. And if it is day, should we be secreting melatonin? No. Pineal gland, shut down. That's what happens. It's a very simple reaction. Your circadian rhythm is up there in your brain, and it's trying to figure out, is it day, is it night, What's going on? Where are we? This is what happens when you fly from Los Angeles to New York. And it's a little bit off. And what happens is the reason why you're able to adjust after a few days is because your suprachiasmatic nucleus, your clockmaker, your conductor of the orchestra, is saying, wait a minute, I'm noticing that the day is a little bit early over here. Let's adjust so that everything can be just right. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if it sees, if it's ready, it's like, I think it's ready. We're ready for sleep. Set on the melatonin. We need melatonin tonight. And then all of a sudden, there's that light that's coming into his eyes. And what is he going to say? Whoa, 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 whoa. I thought it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. But I am seeing light. Therefore, it must not be 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. It must be 5 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. Shut down that melatonin. We'll be secreting that later, thank you very much. Do you understand what's going on here? It's very simple. And what kind of light has the best ability to shut it down? Blue light. The kind of light that we see in LEDs, the kind of light that we see on our smartphones, tablets, all of those things, okay? So what is regulated by the circadian rhythm? Look at all of these things, folks. Circulating melatonin, it reduces cancer, cortisol production, it's an antioxidant, it's beneficial for sleep. Regulation, you have peripheral clocks, feeding and fasting rhythms, cholecystokinin, leptin, ghrelin, this has to do with body fat, body temperature, pancreas, glucose metabolism, vasopressin, acetylcholine, that's a neurotransmitter. Cortisol, this is what's give you energy in the morning, insulin, all of this stuff is regulated by that. So what happens when we mess up the dysregulation, when we mess up circadian rhythm? In rodents, we can see all sorts of things, including tumor development, okay? Forced desynchronization of light and dark cycles can cause problems with hormones. Okay, what about sleep misalignment by sleep deprivation? Increased markers of insulin resistance and inflammation. Folks, these are papers that have gone on for a long time. Unscheduled secretion of insulin, leptin, and norepinephrine. These are studies in humans. All right, so this is what happens. Here is reality. Here is nighttime up until 6 in the morning. Then you have daytime until about 6 in the evening. And then you have nighttime. And you live in this environment. Let's just say, for instance, that you live on a desert island. Okay? You're there on one of the undiscovered Hawaiian islands. Okay? And you're sitting there shipwrecked, but you have your coconut with the straw, and you are just living it up. And someone delivers it every day. You have no worries. You don't want to be rescued. And when the sun comes up in the morning, that's exactly at the right time for your circadian rhythm. And when the sun goes down, you are perfectly aligned. Okay? Now, one day, a little package comes to you, and you open it up, and it's an iPad. And you're like, oh, this can't get any better. I get to watch all my favorite shows now. Pull up YouTube, and I know this is an old picture here, right? That's an old PC desktop. But any kind of screen, phone like that, what's going to happen is when you start using this at night is you're going to tell your circadian rhythm, this even though it is nighttime, it doesn't look like it's nighttime to the circadian rhythm. And so what is it going to do? It's going to, watch this, it's going to shift your circadian rhythm to the right, which means you're delaying. Do you see how you've delayed it? This is now over here. So it's nighttime, but according to your circadian rhythm, it's still daytime. Folks, what happens? When you want to go to bed, you can't go to bed because your circadian rhythm is like, what? You want to go to bed? What? It's not time to go to bed. I just saw light. We're not going to bed at light. And so what happens is millions of Americans go to bed and they can't fall asleep. Insomnia, we call that insomnia, correct? All right, but do you still need to get up in the morning and get to your job? Or if you live, far away from your job because, housing is so expensive, you got to move far away and get onto the freeway and take, ride shares or carpool lanes or fast track, right? You got to get up like at 4 in the morning to be able to get up to your work so you can start your job at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And so do you notice what's happening here, folks? what's happening is we're adopting all of these societal norms that pushes our sleep time later and later and later. And at the same time, we're also living in a society where we have to get up earlier and earlier and earlier. What is that doing to our ability to sleep? It's getting squished. That's okay. We live in a society where sleep are for weak people. I stay up all night. I did this, stayed up all night, and I worked on this. Oh, good for you. You did such a good job. Let's pat you on the back. You spent all night working on this. Not good. This is what's going on, though, okay? So, light after sunset tends to delay your circadian rhythm by suppressing melatonin production in the pineal gland. This causes your body to delay sleep onset. Light early. Now, this is the key. Okay, let's go back here. Because I told you already that one of the things, let's back it up, one of the things here is the presence of darkness that signals to your body that it's time for melatonin. Can you guess what is the signal for cortisol to spike just as high at the beginning of the day? What do you think it is? Absolutely. Cortisol is being brought on by light, and melatonin is being brought on by dark. And what happens, folks, is when we have dark days and bright nights, it's like a complete catastrophe. What you want to have in the morning is you want to have a huge cortisol spike. A lot of you have heard a lot of bad things about cortisol. Cortisol this, cortisol that, stress this, stress that. Your body will get as much cortisol as your body needs. It's on a feedback loop. If you don't get enough cortisol, your body will tell it to make more until it gets enough. Here's the problem. If you don't get a huge spike at the very beginning of the day, you are now relegated to getting this lipemic, anemic, creepy, crawly cortisol throughout the rest of your day under chronic situation, and it'll even run into your melatonin at night. As opposed to you getting up in the morning and getting bright light into your eyes, you'll get all of your cortisol at the beginning of the day when you need it, and then it'll come right down and you'll have this rest from cortisol for the rest of the day. So what is it that you absolutely need to have at the beginning of the day to have beautiful cortisol secretion? Bright light. What is it that you need at the end of the day, after the sun goes down at 9 o'clock at night, to make sure you have a beautiful evening and beautiful night, that you sleep perfectly well? Absolute darkness. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what you should work so hard to get, because you will see the benefits in your life. Unfortunately, we have the technology now where we completely blow this up. Light early when you wake up tends to anchor your circadian rhythm, but requires more intensity given that the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells are less sensitive at that time of the day. A larger rise in cortisol. So cortisol, it's a steroid hormone. It's made in the adrenal gland. It peaks first thing in the morning, gradually tapers off, and naders at midnight. Sets the timing for melatonin release about 12 to 14 hours later. So if it's at 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 hours later is going to be, 8 to 10, kind of like 9 o'clock. Cortisol and melatonin will continue on almost an exactly 24-hour cycle, even in complete constant darkness. Light is the only variable that we can control. You need to turn off the light at night. You need to get outside in the morning time. Oh, but I turn on the lights in the house. Not enough. The lux in your house when you turn the lights on is about 100 lux. Do you know what the lux is outside in the bright daylight? 100,000 lux. That's going to do the trick. That's going to finish the work. Not being in your home in the morning. So get outside. Cortisol pulse shifted late to the day. So if you don't get outside, and when I say get outside, if you haven't gotten outside by 9 o'clock in the morning, you've missed it for the day. You've missed the bus. The train has gone, left the station, the ship has sailed. Your day, if you want to have a good night's sleep that night, that starts before 9 o'clock that day. You need to get outside, get some bright light. Okay? Trust me on this. Cortisol pulse shifts late to the day and is correlated with what? What happens if you don't get bright light in the morning? Anxiety and depressive disorders. Oh, doctor, I'm depressed. Well, why are you depressed? Well, you're probably depressed because you woke up late this morning. Well, I had to go to bed late last night. Do you see how bad behavior begets bad behavior? You've got to interrupt this vicious cycle. Bright, early morning sunlight will give you a better night that night, will allow you to sleep better, and will allow it to be easier to get up the next morning. So bad behavior begets bad behavior. Good behavior interrupts the vicious cycle and allows you to adopt better health policy. Cortisol. Bright light is a strong stimulus for adrenal production of cortisol. But the retinal photoreceptors are not sensitive in the morning, so you need to get outside. Chronic stress, suppression of sex hormone production, all of these things is a problem. Melatonin. It's involved in the time of day and the time of signaling, builds sleep pressure. Bright light suppresses melatonin within minutes, and recovery is slow and incomplete. Okay? Even brief exposure to indoor light. Folks, even light can still be detected in the retina through closed eyelids. This is why I highly recommend, if you have clock radios, if you have screens in your bedroom, turn them off, cover them up. You really want to have a completely dark bedroom. Okay? You'd be surprised how these little LEDs that flicker on your Wi-Fi or on your phone or whatever it is that you've got in your bedroom, they can still get into your eye. Put tape over it. Okay? I'm not joking. It's true. Melatonin protects against cancer via multiple pathways. WHO has classified circadian disruptive shift work as a probable what? Carcinogen. Positive association between shift work and breast cancer risk may in many studies, but inconsistent evidence in human cohorts and a paucity of data from other cancer types. This is what I was talking about before. Reduced cancer incidence in totally blind people, about a 31% reduction in cancer in people who could not have bright light in their eyes at night. Well, they could, but it wouldn't be going to their circadian. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's impossible. So these people, so in other words, this is a good way of thinking about this. What would happen if everybody in the country went to bed at night, turned off the lights? There could be a 31% reduction in cancer. If we just did that. Just did that. Okay? All right, let me give you some real-world evidence. Evening use of light-emitting e-readers. How many of you like to read on your Kindle or your e-book or whatever? Okay? That's got a backlight to it. What they did, and that's the LE book versus a regular old-fashioned open up the book and put a little soft light on and read it. What they did was they looked at the spectrum of light that comes from the LE book, and you can barely see it here at the bottom, but the spectrum of light that comes from the regular good old-fashioned book. Do you see the difference between those two and how much light is coming into your eye? Do you think that this would show a difference in somebody reading a book at night? It absolutely would. So much so that look how much longer it took the person to fall asleep when they read the LE book. It was 26 minutes versus this book, that the person that read the regular book, it only took them 16 minutes. So an extra 10 minutes of trying to fall asleep when they have that light going in and it's shutting down melatonin production. All right, so what should you do in the morning? Before 9 a.m., 30 seconds to 30 minutes of light. Depends on how much light. If it's a bright, sunny day, hey, don't look directly at the sun, but get out there, open your eyes. Don't let anything between you and the sun, and let it go. 2, 3, 4 minutes, that's probably good enough. If it's cloudy, you're probably going to need a little bit more time to actually satisfy the requirements. No sunglasses. Please don't use any blue blockers because you want that blue light coming into your eyes in the early portion of the morning so you get that cortisol spike and get it over and done with so you can be free of cortisol for the rest of the day. Now, most of us live here in Southern California, but if I were talking to people in New York or in Boston where it's very dark early in the morning, you've got to go off to work, you can actually buy these 10,000 lux SAD lamps. SAD stands for seasonal affective disorder. You put it about 11 to 15 inches from your eyes, and you look at it for about 20 to 30 minutes, and that should be suffice to get that cortisol bump, okay? So when it's dark outside and you've got to go off to work, this is what you ought to do. It's the second best thing. The very best thing, of course, is to get out into sunlight. All right, what should you do in the evening? This is a lot of words here. It basically can be summarized into 2 words. No light. Thank you. No light. I mean, we could talk about the melatonin, we could talk about the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but folks, turning off the lights after 9 o'clock at night and going to bed is going to start your sleep early. And there's an old saying that says, the hours of sleep before midnight are worth 2 hours of sleep after midnight. We're going to talk more about how a lot of these old sayings, when I say old, I'm not just talking 100 years ago. I'm not even talking about 1,000 years ago. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years ago. Some of these things that were written down, they're pretty spot on. We'll talk about that. We talked about this study in our first lecture that we had. It seems so long ago now, on Friday evening. Bright nights and darker days. So in other words, when the day should be bright, you should be outside getting that bright light. But what do? We dim it down by staying inside of buildings. And at night, when we should have absolute darkness, what are we doing? We're lighting it up with all sorts of devices. So these bright nights and dark days predict higher mortality. I already showed you this data before. Look at this. Literally, as these people are going through the day, light is showing to be a way of actually reducing death. This is death, folks. The risk of death. Light in the eyes is a benefit from about 8 o'clock in the morning on to about 9 o'clock at night. And then it sort of plateaus and then becomes a big liability. Okay? These findings demonstrate the importance of maintaining a dark environment across the late night and early morning hours, when the central circadian pacemaker is most sensitive to light, and seeking bright light during the day to enhance circadian rhythms. Protection of lighting environments may be especially important at those at risk for both circadian disruption and mortality, such as in intensive care or aged care settings. Folks, so many of our loved ones are put into nursing homes, and we are lucky if they come down for dinner. They are in those rooms 24 hours a day. There is no circadian rhythm. They become confused. Their dementia worsens, and we wonder why. These people should be, you and them both, should be getting outside in the day with bright light exposure, and at night they should have the TVs turned off, and it should be absolutely pitch black. This is one of the major problems that we have in the hospital. When we have patients that are admitted to the hospital, let me tell you, we're checking their vital signs every 4 hours. People are coming and going, drawing blood, things beeping, nurses chatting. All sorts of things are happening. This is not a place to get better if you can help it. And so what happens is a lot of these people, especially in the intensive care unit, they go crazy. It's called delirium. They're perfectly normal when they come in, but they lose their mind because they're not getting daytime brightness and nighttime darkness. And do you know what we do to prevent this? We actually have programs so that we turn down the lights at night. And maybe if we can help it, we don't check their vital signs as often as we would normally do. Do you understand what I'm saying? Your body needs to have one set of circumstances in the day and a completely different set at night, and what we're doing is we're merging them so that we can't tell the difference. And that's not good for our body, okay? So this is what happens again in Disneyland. You've got Space Mountain, but nobody did their job last night. It's not optimal, and that's the same thing that's happening in our body. Here's another one. Let's talk about kids, 11 to 13-year-olds. They exercise at school. Well, this study found that when they exercised them outside, it was very different than when we did the same exact exercise inside. Outdoor physical activity is more beneficial than indoor physical activity for cognition in young people. The same 30-minute basketball session improved cognition more when done outdoors than indoors. And where did they see the improvement? Check this out. This is exactly where we need to see improvement in today's kids. Inhibitory control, working memory, and attention. How many kids have attention deficits? This is actually attention getting. And what is it? It's going outside. Guess what's the problem with outside? Can you see the iPad very well? I can't see. What? I can't see my iPad. I can't see my phone. I got to get out of the light. I got to see what's going on my phone because my social media is blowing up and I got to. Do you see what I'm saying? Got to make a choice. Are we the slave of the screen or are we going to get some sunlight outside? You guys already talked about this. We said, what were the two things that your suprachiasmatic nucleus takes information from the external environment? One of them was light, and what was the other one? Food. So there is a central clock, and then there are peripheral clocks all throughout our body. Guess where the major peripheral clocks are centered? The digestive tract. And if you are stimulating one while the other one is not being stimulated, you have now the peripheral clocks not going well along with the central clock. And when they are miscued, you're going to get problems. This is exactly what happens at night. When we have night shift workers who are working at night, and they're unfortunately also eating at night. I already showed you this study, and we can go through it briefly again. But notice here, this is the daytime meal intervention group. So they're working at night. Here, you can see them working. But the red, these little red dots here are when they're eating. Now, notice when they're eating. They're eating during the what? Day. And they're also, these black bars are when they're sleeping. So in other words, they're working night shift, but they are not eating. They work, but they don't eat. Why? They don't want to confuse the central clock with the peripheral clocks. They want to make sure that that's the same. Because when those are working in unison, then the gene products of those clocks are going to be working in unison as opposed to counter distinction to each other. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what do they notice? They notice that the black undulation is what normally happens in normal people who work during the day. Notice that the daytime meal intervention group, those that did not eat at night, look very similar. Okay? And those that didn't look very different. Their PNN50s were lower, and when that's lower, that means you have reduced vagal tone, and that means you have a high sympathetic dominance, worse cardiovascular, and overall health. Another endpoint, again, those that don't eat at night, things seem to be going just fine. Those that are eating at night, there's a miscommunication between the central and the peripheral clocks, not going well. We have lower RMSS-DMS, which what? Is lower parasympathetic vagal activity. If it's low, it indicates reduced vagal tone. This is seen with stress, illness, aging, cardiovascular, and metabolic disease. I wish they would tell this to nursing graduates. Again, here's another one, looks pretty similar. We're not damaging things too much from a cardiovascular point because you've got to work at night. What really adds fuel to the fire is when you eat at night. So don't eat at night. And this has to do with the ratios, and we talked about sympathetic dominance. But the one that really gets to me as a pulmonologist, because I see people with blood clots, notice again, looks very similar when you don't eat at night. When you do eat at night, here we have an increase in PA1, and when you have an increase in PA1, that leads to increased thrombosis risk. And that's what I don't want to see in nighttime nurses, nighttime physicians, is people coming down with blood clots. Do you understand what I'm saying? We know that this happens. People who work night shifts have a higher incidence of all of these bad things. But what choice do we have? Are there any cases in, let's just pull the Bible, that's a nice historical book, of people staying up all night and doing things? Yeah? I can remember people praying late into the evening, but do we have any evidence in there that they were eating late at night? Interesting. I have a couple of things that I've learned along the way. Here's a Schwelt idiom, if you will. You should eat when the sun is up. If the sun ain't up, you shouldn't be eating. Does that make sense? That's just kind of like, yeah. It's probably a bad idea if you're eating if the sun is not up. The sun should be up. If the sun is up, you go ahead and eat. If the sun is not up, you should not eat. That's generally a good one. What about this one? Check this one out. Natural daylight through windows as opposed to artificial lighting during office hours improves glucose control and 24-hour substrate metabolism in type 2 diabetes patients. Okay, think about all of the people that go to work. They drive, you get up in the morning. Okay, so first of all, here's the whole disaster. They are doing their work on their iPad late in the evening. They've missed the melatonin. They go to work late. They go to bed late at 1 o'clock in the morning. They wake up at 4:30. They did not get enough sleep. They're very tired. They drive in their car to their work. They park in the underground parking structure. They go up to their office, and they're now in a beautiful corner office with some windows that have infrared light blocked, because that's the law. And they have a bunch of nice LED bulbs that don't give off infrared light. And this is where we are. So what's going to happen to these people? Boy, this is really a high risk for diabetes. All right, let's take a look. So this was a study that they did, 13 subjects, 8 male, 5 female, BMI of 30. By the way, that's obesity, okay? Hemoglobin A1C was 6.1. Fasting blood glucose was about 146. That's right there in the diabetes range. And check this out. They did a randomized crossover control. It's a very powerful study design because each person is their own control. Okay? So half of them went to a full sunlight room, okay? 1,000 to 10,000 lux, all this natural light coming in. This probably wasn't, I don't know for a fact if this was glazed with that stuff that prevents infrared light, but it was not here in the United States, so it could have been. And they were there from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon for 4.5 days, okay? Then they did a 4-week washout, and then they went and worked in an LED lit room at 300 lux for the same amount of time for the same amount of days. The other group did exactly the opposite, okay? And now what they did was they actually measured what happened in those two environments. You guys ready? You ready for this? Are you really ready for this? There should not, I mean, according to, if I would have asked you this 2 weeks ago, you would have said, well, what's the difference? Okay, let's see what the difference. So we looked at continuous glucose monitoring, circulating metabolites, calorimetry. I mean, these are very sophisticated things, right? They did the continuous glucose monitoring for 4.5 days, day 4 to 5 right after. Okay, so right after they did this, they checked metabolites, calorimetry, muscle biopsy, looking at gene expression. They looked at a mixed meal test on the morning of day 5. This is in Maastricht, okay? All right, here we go. Let's see what it is. All right, so we're looking at how often was their blood sugar in the target range. Those that were in the natural environment, on average, this was statistically significant, had a higher time, had more time in the appropriate range of blood sugar than those that were in the artificial lighting environment. In other words, when you are working in an artificial working environment, what's going to happen to your blood sugar? It's going to go up. When you're working in natural light environment, what's going to happen to your blood sugar? It's going to go down. You should already know that based on the study that I showed you on Friday night that showed that sunlight is able to penetrate through the entire body. It goes into the mitochondria, it speeds up the metabolism, and it drops blood sugar. Okay? Natural sunlight, which is infrared, visible, and ultraviolet. What type of light do we have in LED lights? Only visible light, because the engineers believe that that infrared light is wasted energy because it doesn't give visible light. You understand what I'm saying? All right, what about glucose concentrations? Do you see here the difference between the glucose concentrations in the artificial light environment versus that in the natural light environment? There's a slight decrease across the board on average. So what do we see? We saw glucose time in the target more of the time when you're outside, or sorry, in natural light, and substrate metabolism increased. Exposure to natural light positively impacts metabolism and cloud support treatment and prevention of metabolic diseases. Yet, this is what we are given. This is what is exciting. This is where we want to be, right? Isn't this what we see? advertising, excitement, McDonald's, Bank of America, I don't know. You see the thing drop? This is Times Square, right? All right. So again, our bodies have two major divisions. There is a time for building, and there is a time for what? Repair. If you do no repair and you just build all the time, what is your body going to look like? It's going to look like a horrible mess. You need to break things down, and you cannot break things down unless you are sleeping. And your body will not break those things down unless you are not eating. And it takes about 4 to 5 hours from the time that you stop eating before your body will enter into that phase. So if the last thing you do before you go to bed at night is eat something, and let's just say you happen to spend 8 hours of sleep, how many of those 8 hours of sleep is going to be spent on actually doing repair? 3 hours. You need to have a huge amount of time before you go to bed where you're not eating anything to get the most benefit out of those 8 hours. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about intermittent fasting. Fasting is not just about eating less calories or burning fat. A lot of people think fasting, oh, don't eat food. Oh no, I'm going to get hungry. Oh, not good. What I'm going to show you is that simply the timing of when you eat can have a huge impact. I'm not even talking about eating less. I'm just talking about when you eat. Because now that we're all very smart about circadian rhythm, we're now going to use that knowledge as leverage as to when we should be taking in our calories so that we can give an opportunity for your body to do that repair. When the body switches over to ketones, it signals to the body to completely metabolize in a different way. Ketone bodies are not just fuel used during periods of fasting. Notice, they are potent signaling molecules with major effects on cell and organ functions. This is what you want to be having as your eyes fall asleep, in a dark room, getting a whole bunch of melatonin. Okay? So ketogenesis, by the way, this is the New England Journal of Medicine, okay? This is not some shady backwoods paper, okay? Ketogenesis initiates activity in a variety of cellular signaling pathways known to influence health and aging. It enhances the body's defense against oxidative and metabolic stress and initiates the removal or repair of damaged molecules. This carries over to the non-fasting period and can improve what? Glucose regulation, increase stress resistance and suppress inflammation, and improve mental and physical performance. So there is intermittent fasting, also known as alternative day fasting, so fasting every other day. You have the 5 and the 2, where you fast for 2 days out of the week. There's different ways of doing this. The one that I think is probably the easiest one to adopt is this one called time-restricted eating, where you eat for about 10 hours in a 10-hour window. Why is that? If you can concentrate when you eat, that means you can allow more time to do repairs. And this is important. You don't have to memorize this, but the effects of fasting are on major signaling pathways like mTOR, the ULK complex, and this thing called autophagy. Do you know what autophagy is? Auto means by itself, and phagy means eating. This is called self-eating. Self-eating. Your body is going through, and it's fine. Folks, your body already has a list made out. It already knows, oh yeah, that area there in the pancreas, whew, that needs to be taken care of. I go home and my wife hands me a list, okay? Each of your bodies has a honey-do list. The problem is that if you don't sleep and you don't allow your body to do that stuff, it never gets to it. It knows it needs to be done, but you're not allowing your body to do it. You'll feel a lot better when those areas of your body that are damaged get broken down and rebuilt brand new. How many of you, if you had a broken washer, would have let it sit in your home for years before you replaced it? How many of you, if you had a trash compactor that wasn't working, would let it sit there for years before taking it out and replacing it? Or a light bulb that didn't work in a hallway, right? That's what's happening to your body when you refuse to sleep, when you refuse to rest and allow your body to repair. Well, I'll show you the data. This is quite interesting. So Alzheimer's disease, cancer, all of these things. Let's go through this. Prolonged fasting, this is a paper. These are all scientific papers. I'm not making this up. This is not my opinion. This is what the science says. This is University of Southern California. Prolonged fasting reduces the IGF, which is an insulin growth factor, something that you don't really want to have, to promote hematopoietic stem cell-based regeneration and reverse immunosuppression. Let me tell you the short story, folks. They give people chemotherapy at USC. 2 weeks later, their white counts drop off the face of the planet, and they get all sorts of infections. I know this because I admit patients to the hospital with this. Patients coming in, oh, chemotherapy. When was your last chemotherapy? Oh, 2 weeks ago. Okay, makes sense. Your immune system just got wiped out. It's an unintended side effect of chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is going to attack anything that's dividing. Your immune system is always dividing because it always needs new cells. This is an unintended consequence of chemotherapy. What did they do at USC? They found when they fasted these people 72 hours. That sounds like a lot. I'm just giving you the impression of what's going on. For 72 hours, they took these cancer patients, they fasted them, and then they gave them chemotherapy. Their white counts didn't drop. It was amazing. Intermittent fasting of 72 hours, but not 24 hours, was able to maintain the white blood cells even in light of chemotherapy. This was their new protocol from this point on. It's like, we're not going to be giving chemotherapy to people that can't do this. Or if they can do it, they're going to make sure that they do. Because they said, and this is the researcher that said this, it looked as though their immune system was completely reborn when they did this. 72 hours, 3 days of water fasting. Intermittent fasting promotes white adipose browning and decreases obesity by shaping gut microbiota. Wow, how many positive things are there? Imagine making your mitochondria burn fuel so that your basal metabolic rate goes up. That's like what you used to have when you were a kid, where you could eat cake and you wouldn't gain a pound, right? Now you just look at the cake in Costco and you walk out 5 pounds heavier. Gut microbiota, this is the stuff that makes you healthy. Having a good gut So intermittent fasting promotes this, turns white fat into brown fat, reduces the risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, changes gut microbiota. Oh, let me tell you something. My parents, who were in their 80s, about 5 or 6 years ago, decided that they were going to fast every single Monday. And they do that once a week. They don't eat any food for a whole 24 hours every single week. They are more healthy now in their early 80s than they were back in their 70s. They go on walks every day. They listen to what I do. They listen to what I say. They watch it on YouTube. I go to a podcast, and the next thing I know, they're reporting back to me doing the stuff that I guess I have to be on a YouTube channel. I can't just tell it to them in real life, right? Who's going to listen to their son, right? But yes, this is what they do. I would highly recommend, if you are noticing that you have a decreased energy, you try doing this. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you should do this, because it's not something that you want to go into full bore, because there are some things that you have to watch for. Time-restricted feeding improves blood glucose and insulin sensitivity in overweight patients with type 2 diabetes, a randomized controlled trial. So this is in China, 120 overweight diabetics. On average, what happened was they delayed their first meal by about 2 hours. So instead of eating at 7 o'clock in the morning, they ate at 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay? And then they advanced their last meal by about 2 hours. So instead of eating at 7 o'clock at night, they would eat at 5 o'clock at night. So what are we doing? Instead of compressing the amount of time we have for sleep, we're compressing the amount of time we have for eating. Eat breakfast later, eat dinner much earlier. Compress it together and allow all of that other time for your body to do the repair that it needs. So this is a 10-hour eating restriction. So they ate only from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening. And they did it for 12 weeks. What happened? Here you go. Here's the time-restricted feeding. They started eating at 8 o'clock, and they could eat whatever they wanted to. They could eat whatever they wanted to and whenever they wanted to. In other words, we did not tell them what to eat, and we did not tell them how much to eat. We just simply said, this is the time that you have to eat. Do you understand what I'm saying? And just doing that, we didn't even say eat a plant-based diet. Imagine if we did that. Okay? During just doing that, what did we see? We saw a 10% reduction further in the hemoglobin A1C. We saw a further reduction in fasting glucose by an additional 12 points, 12 milligrams per deciliter. And not only that, but the weight dropped, instead of just 1.8 pounds, they dropped a full 6.6 pounds of weight. We did not tell them what to eat or how much to eat, simply when to eat. Can you do that? That doesn't sound too hard. We're leveraging our understanding of circadian rhythm to make changes in our body to allow the rest and repair that our body needs. What are the benefits of fasting? Metabolic health, a reduction in visceral fat, fasting insulin resistance. What about physical exercise? A reduction in fat mass while maintaining muscle area of the arm, thigh, and maximal strength. By the way, this is all of the data. This is the studies that show this. Breast cancer, the most common cancer a woman will ever have to experience in her life. Check this out. Fasting less than 13 hours per night was associated with a 36% increase in breast cancer recurrence. If you're a woman who has had breast cancer, I would highly recommend adopting a feeding plan here, an eating plan, where you are fasting for at least 13 hours per night. Okay? What I mean to say is if you plan to have breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, then you should not be eating anything after 7 o'clock at night. That's simple. When you do that, you could reduce your recurrence risk by a third just by doing that one simple thing. What about hormones? A 3-day fast. 3 days into a fast, and growth hormone was 3-fold higher. Whoa. Do you know what growth hormone is? It's that hormone that is released during slow wave sleep, and it's that hormone that makes you physically restorative and feel much better. Okay? Gut microbiome. Fasting changed the gut microbiome to a more healthier population. All right, so how do you get started? You want to do some intermittent fasting, what is it that you need to do? I want you to define the sleep that you're going to have. You need to get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Okay? Figure out what that's going to be and when that's going to be. No calories 1 hour after waking up. So I'm going to say here, let's say you're going to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Let's be generous. Yeah, let's say 10 o'clock at night. And 7 hours later, that would be 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's say 6 o'clock in the morning. Let's say you're going to get 8 hours of sleep. You go to bed at 10 p.m. You wake up at 6 a.m. Between 6 and 7, find something to do other than eat calories. Okay? And then no calories ideally for 3 to 4 hours before going to sleep. Okay? Because it takes 5 to 6 hours to transition from a fed to a fasting state. So what do you want to do? Do you want to drop breakfast or do you want to drop dinner? I'll tell you, when I first heard this, I didn't understand it. This is not the same person who's talking to you. I said, I am going to drop breakfast because I don't have to sit. I can get up later in the morning, and when my family is around me at night, we can socialize, because that's when we socialize, right? When you come home from work, everyone sits around the table, you have a nice big dinner. Folks, that makes it may make sociological sense. It makes absolutely no biochemical sense whatsoever. Number one, I already told you that your insulin is most powerful in the morning. Okay? I already told you that we shouldn't be eating when the sun is down. Okay? So the thing that you should do is you should eat breakfast like a king. Eat lunch like a prince. And eat dinner like a pauper. And sometimes paupers don't eat dinner at all, okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? So let's look at the data for this. Here is a study where they did 2 things. Check this out. They had a control group that had 3 meals in 12 hours. So they had breakfast at 8, lunch at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and dinner at 8 o'clock at night. And you're like, wow, that's pretty bad. But you know that that's probably what you actually do, right? Yeah. Now, they compared that to eating breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, lunch at 11, and dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Same calories, same amount of food, They just changed up the timing of it. And they looked at continuous glucose monitoring. Here, they had 18 hours until the next meal. That's well above 13, by the way. And here they had 12 hours until the next meal. That's below 13. So let's see what happens. Check this out. So in terms of circadian clock genes, there was a bunch of statistical significant differences across the board. What do I want you to take from this slide? I want you to understand and remind yourself that what you put into your mouth is actually changing your circadian rhythm, because your circadian rhythm is looking at light and food, exactly. But there's other ones. There's the BDNF gene, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Notice what happened here. First of all, cortisol levels were different. BDNF were actually better. They were higher in the time-restricted feeding, statistically significantly higher. What does that mean? This is the thing that actually promotes the survival of nerve cells. How many of you want to not get dementia as you get older? Might want to consider time-restricted eating. All right, what about sirtuins? Sirtuins is really important. Again, statistically significantly higher, protects against inflammation, oxidative stress, DNA damage. What happens when you have DNA damage? That leads to what? Thank you, cancer. We don't want that. We want sirtuins to go up. What about LC3A? Statistically significantly much higher in those that had that food compressed into that time. It's an essential structural component of autophagosomal membranes. You know what an autophagosomal membrane is? It's the covering of a cell that eats the bad stuff. You want those things. Okay? It's been shown to play a major role against multiple chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases by recycling damaged and used proteins and organelles. Folks, these are the things that you need to repair your body. Why is it that I can't get better? Why is it that I have this back pain? Why is it that this and that and Time-restricted eating. Get up in the morning, get outside and get some bright sunlight, go home, turn off the lights, get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. If you just do those very simple, low-cost things, you're not going to need to go online and get my supplements, okay? Or get their supplements, okay? Or buy this. You just need to buy this tablet. It will make you feel so much better if you just buy this supplement. Does any of this cost anything? I don't know. Does it cost any money for you to time your meals differently? Does it cost any money for you to get up earlier in the morning and get some bright sunlight? Does it cost any money to turn off? It saves money. You can turn off the electricity at night, folks. Health does not have to be an expensive thing. You just have to have the knowledge to know what to implement, okay? So, how do you break a fast in the morning? Make sure that, what are the things that don't break a fast? By the way, why do they call it breakfast? You're breaking a fast. You see? Okay, so is water okay? Yes, water is not going to break your fast. There's no calories in water. Lemon water, that's still okay. You can do that. Mixed on coffee and caffeine. Some say no human studies. Let me give you a little hint. Probably best not to drink coffee. It has caffeine in it, and that has other problems. What about taking medications in the morning if you have to? You can probably do it with a spoonful of yogurt, but remember that some nutrients absorb better with food. So yogurt or some sort of other alternative, which is a lipid-based thing, can help dissolve like vitamin D and things so you can absorb that better, okay? But if you just want to wait till you actually break your fast with actual breakfast, then you can do that as well. Something that you definitely don't want to break a fast with breakfast is juices. Orange juice, apple juice, all of those things. That's like the worst thing you could possibly do to break a fast. So if you buy orange juice or apple juice and you have that, I know I love orange juice. I have a relative who, wherever we go, his wife always buys him apple juice or orange juice. He loves orange juice. And I love orange juice too. But it's not good for you, is it? It's a huge bolus of glucose all at once. Better to actually just have a orange. Exactly. All right. Who is this not for? Who would I recommend not doing this right off the bat? If you are pregnant, okay? It's okay to do 12 and 12 gently. So eating 12 and then being off for 12. But that fetus is growing inside. Your baby is growing, okay? This is not the time to think about that. People with a history of eating disorder should also be careful, okay? The binge stuff and all that. Problems with keeping blood sugars even. So we don't want hypoglycemia. And then talk to your physician first about this. Look, folks, this is what's going to happen. When you change your eating pattern, anytime you change your eating pattern, when you don't feed yourself at the time of day when you normally should be fed, what's going to happen? You're going to feel what? Hungry. Does hunger mean you're going to die? No. Does hunger mean that you have no energy to use from? No, it doesn't. You will not die. You will have plenty of energy. It's just that the stomach is used to digesting at that hour because it has a peripheral clock that has been set by you. Guess what happens after you stop eating at a particular time? Your stomach has smarts. It's not going to get hungry anymore. If you adjust to a time that is more conducive to what we've shown up here, you will no longer feel hungry at night. And when you start eating in the daytime, you're going to feel more hungry because your stomach is going to be attuned to that. So in other words, it's not a failure if you start to feel hungry and don't feed yourself. What do you do if you do feel hungry? Drink water, fill up the stomach, put things that are non-caloric in there so you feel like you're satiated, but you're not getting the calories. Do you understand what I'm saying, folks? There's very simple ways of doing this. I would not recommend going very radically in one area. If you are eating late at night, start eating earlier and start moving it more in towards that direction. If you're not eating much in the morning at all and most of your calories are in the evening, start to do a slow seesaw in the other direction. Make very deliberate changes in a particular direction, but don't do it too quickly, because what happens if you do this too dramatically? You're going to be depressed, you're going to be upset, and you're going to just throw the whole thing out. And I don't want you to do that. Okay? There's nothing up here that you cannot do in terms of this. So here's a possible 7 to 7 schedule for those of you who work in the environment of like a 7 to 7 shift. 5 a.m., wake up, do a satellite or go outside. You can do some meditation or a workout from 5 to 6. Eat breakfast at 6 a.m., leave for work at 6:30, get to work at 7. Go outside on your break, leave for work, get home, do not eat, go to bed, turn off the lights at 9, and you can do this. So you can even do this even with a 12-hour shift if you are very creative. All right, so this is another thing that we're going to sort of transition to, and that is this is a writer, a health reformer from the 1800s, a lady by the name of Ellen White, who did not know anything about melatonin, who did not know anything about circadian rhythm, who did not know anything about the suprachiasmatic nucleus or intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Yet, what did she say? Make it a habit not to sit up after 9 o'clock. Every what? Light should be extinguished. This turning night into day is a wretched, health-destroying habit. Was she right? She was right. And folks, this is where I want to go to in the next lecture, in the next hour here as we're wrapping up this one. And that is this, is that there is a lot of wisdom that I have seen in my research over the years. Science is actually showing the issues with the evidence for a lot of things that have been told us in the past. And what I'm going to do is I want to, in the next lecture, and this is going to be kind of a mind-blowing thing, because we're going to look at some ancient texts. We're going to go way back, and we're going to start looking at some things, and we're going to see that, in fact, a lot of this truth that has been there is now being shown by science in that way. So to do that, I want to make sure that your minds are clear, that you have good circulation in your brain. And so I'm actually going to invite Jorge to come up and to do a little bit of a exercise thing here in between lectures as we get set up. This is the three-legged stool that we're going to talk a little bit about. We have been talking all weekend about physical health. And physical health is just one leg of perfect health, which is the stool. Does anyone want to give a guess about what the other two legs are? Physical health. What else do we need? Mental health. And what's the third leg? Spiritual health. I'll give you some examples where I've had patients in the hospital where I have saved their life, and they were so sad that I had done so because they wanted to die. They wanted to commit suicide. And when they had found out that I had saved their life, they were absolutely miserable. It was at that point that I realized that every day I go to work, I'm only strengthening one of those legs. In order to be able to sit on this stool of perfect health, we need 3 legs. Jorge, take us away.
Thank you. Okay, now I can hear myself too. All right, so give yourself some room. So we're just going to start with just some of these. You've done these probably since elementary school, but they're great, and no one has to hurt themselves, and you're able to go to work tomorrow. So let's first of all let's stretch out. Just don't tippy-toe. Just keep your feet flat on the ground, and we're just going to stretch our hands and try to reach that ceiling. Just so you can feel that stretch. Stretch, stretch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put your hands down slowly. Let's do that one more time for 5 seconds. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like don't tippy-toe. And hands down. We'll do it one more time because I think you guys are great. I think you guys should all be in workout clothes right now. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try to reach that ceiling and stop slowly down. That wasn't too bad. You guys did a great job. Now another one that I like to do at work. How many of you guys have heard of tech neck? You know that phenomenon that's going to happen? They say about 10 years from now, the next generation, they're all going to have their necks down because we're always looking at our cell phones. Well, there's something that you could do to help out because obviously cell phones are part of our everyday life. One thing you could do at home is put a towel around your neck. We're not going to use a towel right now, but one simple thing you could do, you could just make 25 of these exercises, strengthen those neck muscles. What you do is I'm going to look sideways here. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your neck back slowly as far as you can without hurting yourself, and then you're going to go forward and then just look out straight. Do not put your chin down, touch your neck, and then you're going to do that, and you're going to repeat that. We're going to do that 20 times. It's really 25 times, and then you go back to doing your work or your daily routine. So I'm going to try that. Here we go. We're going to look out straight. Remember, it's ideal if you put a little resistance with a towel around your neck, but we're not going to have that right now. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you look out straight, don't look down. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 more if you can take this. Here we go. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and one last one. Here we go, and 20. There you go. You could start feeling that your necks are going to get stronger. You do this, even if you just do this once a day. Just take a break from work, whatever you're doing at home. Sometimes we're reading, looking down. And the last thing is just going to be a quick breathing exercise. How many of you have heard of 4-7-8? This is 4 seconds you breathe in, 7 seconds you hold it, 8 seconds you exhale. For those of you that might be tough, there's another version that's called 5-5-5. And we could try that. You just kind of play with it how much you can resist holding your breath. Okay, so what this exercise is very simple. This is just to get relaxed, stress, bring down even cortisol if you do this. Ideally, you should be doing this for at least 2 to 3 minutes. Some say up to 5 minutes. You take a break. But we're just going to try this for about a minute. what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in through our nose for 5 seconds. So I'm going to count 5. Then we're going to hold our breath in for 5 seconds. And then we're going to exhale slowly for 5 seconds, but this time through our mouth. You guys got it? So we're going to call it the 5-5-5. Here we go. I'm going to I'll do the counts for you. Here we go. First it's nose, hold, exhale through mouth. Here we go. So for 5 seconds, here we go. 1, 2, inhale, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale through mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's get ready to inhale again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get ready to exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's do it again. Inhale. 1, slowly. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And get ready to exhale. Slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to do it one last time. Here we go. Inhale slowly through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, calm now. How do you guys feel? You guys ready for part 2? Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys did great. I feel like a motivational speaker up here now. So
Thank you so much. Went to, am I on? You can hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay. I went to Australia, and I met a gentleman who was doing that type of breathing, and he was able to show that in his clinic that he was able to get people's heart rates down by stimulating the vagal tone or vagal nerve, and that he was actually working with an Australian Olympic athlete who runs so that she can breathe. She breathes completely through her nose when she's running, and this actually was able to help her in terms of breaking records and getting on the Australian Olympic team. Very interesting stuff. All right, so again, what I want to talk about is the physical, the mental, and the spiritual as being the 3 legs of a stool. And as I told you, I remember this distinctly. I once had a patient that came in, and he had overdosed on metformin. It was a very dangerous situation because when they overdose on that medication, they can cause a severe lactic acidosis, which makes their blood extremely acidotic. We actually had to put a dialysis catheter in and dialyze him emergently to save his life. And he was so acidotic that when we put him on the ventilator could not breathe for him fast enough that we actually had to he actually coded. And when we got him back, we had to sit there and just bag him with a manual bag just to get him to breathe fast enough to get the CO2 off. We had to dialyze him and then dialyze him again twice. And everybody was working so hard. And when I came back the next day, I heard that he was doing much better. A few days later, he had been downgraded. I went to go see him, and the nurse told me that he was even more depressed than he was previously. He was physically healed. We had saved his life physically. But mentally and spiritually, there was nothing there. It was literally a pogo stick. And that's not a stable situation. So I can't tell you enough how important that has been in my viewpoint in seeing this. We have been talking about New Start: nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust. And I'll tell you, I can show you studies where each one of those letters can make you live 5 to 10 years longer when you do them all together. Okay? 5 to 10 years longer. And that's something that's actually really impressive, and people are very interested in finding out how they can live 10 years longer. Folks, is 10 years going to come and go? Yes, it's going to come and go. Okay? So is that the purpose of why we had this here tonight or here this afternoon? Okay? to make you live 5 to 10 years. That's a side benefit of understanding New Start. Let me tell you what the real value of adopting all of the things that we talked about. Yes, will the diabetes go away? Absolutely. It can certainly go away. Will you lose weight? Absolutely. You know, all of these things you can get from just doing what we've talked to you about. Here's the one thing that you may not understand or realize, and that is that each one of those letters, and I can show you a study to this effect, if you do good nutrition, if you do good exercise, if you use water responsibly, if you go out into the sun, all of those things will do all of what I said, but they'll do one extra thing, and that is it will improve your mind. And why is it so important to have a good mind? It's the one organ we cannot transplant. Okay? The reason why you need a good mind is because the mind is the essential epicenter for these other two legs. You cannot have good mental health unless you have a good mind, a clear mind. You cannot have spiritual health unless you have a clear mind. And that's the importance of all the things. All the other things, by the way, come with it as a bonus. So, what I'm going to show you today, you're going to stick with me in this argumentation, and that is the creation of man, or us, our bodies, how we're put together. It seems almost as though we've been looking at the instruction manual, doesn't it? For how we're put together. And if we read the instruction manual, it seems pretty clear how we're supposed to treat the body. And that's what I'm saying. So, if we go back to the original instruction manual, and I would say this to you, that we have seen here tonight, or we've seen here over this weekend, that the understanding of how we should eat and how we should exercise and the sunlight and the air and the rest and all of these things, they've been actually known for hundreds of years. In fact, if we look to the Romans, in fact, did they not take baths? Wasn't there a major city in England known as Bath? And what did they do in Bath? They took baths, correct? And that was basically hydrotherapy. What about the Greeks, the ancient Greeks? Did they not understand about these sorts of things, about sunlight? Okay? These things that we're telling you now are not new discoveries. They may be rediscoveries, but even look 100 years ago, did we not have hospitals that used sunlight to get people better? We have occasionally dabbled in the truths and the understanding of how to make our bodies healthy. What I want to do is get down to the nitty-gritty and look at some of these ancient texts, if you will, to see what is there. And what I'm going to show you, I think pretty conclusively, is that all of what we need to know is already there, and what science is doing today is simply proving those statements correct. So, if we go to some of these ancient texts, like in the New Testament of the Bible, we see things like this. For as we have many members in one body, and all members have not the same office, so we, being many, are one body in Christ, and every one members of one another. Okay? This is something that Paul wrote over 2,000 years ago, or around 2,000 years ago, correct? This is before Van Leeuwenhoek, we'll talk about him, looked under the microscope in the 1600s and found that everything was made up of cells. There's nothing there. There's absolutely no science here, but in fact, is a body made up of many parts? What are those called? Cells. Cells in our body are made up of many, many parts. Okay? So, Antoine van Leeuwenhoek from 1632 to 1723. He was a Dutch microscope maker. He's known as the father of microscopy. He was the first to identify single-cell organisms on a handheld microscope in 1673. He called them animalcules. He discovered bacteria in 1676. He had no formal scientific training. He was elected the member of the Royal Society of London in 1680, elected the member of the French Academy of Sciences in 1697. His religion was Dutch Reformed Calvinist. He often referred to it with reverence to the wonders God designed in making creatures great and small, and believed that his discoveries were merely further proof of the wonder of creation. So 1,600 years before the first man discovered that, in fact, the body is made up of many things, we have Paul in Romans 12 saying something astounding, that he really had no basis to say such. He's saying that the church under Christ is like a body, and just like a body that we see, it has many members, but not the same office. Now, Paul didn't understand about cells, so he said, oh, there's the foot, there's the hand, there's the eye. These are, of course, our organs. But isn't it interesting that if we take what he says at a much deeper level, it is completely true? And those cells all have the same DNA in it, doesn't it? But yet they work differently. Does an eye cell work differently than a foot cell? Or a skin cell work differently than a liver cell? They have different jobs, but they're all working together in the same body, correct? All right, here's the cell. The cell is extremely complex. You have a nucleus here where the DNA is contained, and outside here in the cytoplasm, you have all sorts of things. There's our mitochondrion right there that we talk so well about, and here's the plasma membrane around it. So every single part of your body is basically in some way looking like this. There's about 38 trillion cells in the human body, 37.2 trillion, and when placed end to end, it would go around the earth multiple times, probably about 20 times. These cells are about 20 microns wide. All right, well, there was a gentleman by the name of William Harvey who lived before Van Leeuwenhoek in the 1500s, 1578 to 1657. And he was an English physician. He was actually the physician to King James I, the same King James that wrote the King James Bible or was around at that time, and King Charles I. He's best known for describing the circulation of blood through the body. Believe it or not, we humans did not understand how blood circulates until the 1500s. We now know that blood leaves the heart from the left ventricle. It goes into our arteries. It goes to all of our tissues, where it gives up oxygen and takes on carbon dioxide, and it gives off other nutrients, and then flows back to the right side of the heart, where it goes to the lungs, and then comes back to the left side of the heart, where it gets pumped out over and over again. And this blood circulates. Prior to that, we believed that blood was just something that oozed out of us. We didn't understand what it was, and that it was made in the liver. It was one of these fluids of the body that we didn't understand well. It wasn't until 1578 that we see that. Yet, you see this here? We see the blood circulating. There's one. How many blood circulation systems are there in the body? One. And then there's the lymphatic system. You can see the lymphatic system here on the right. The lymphatic system takes the excess fluid and it pumps it back and it filters it through all of these lymph nodes in your body, and then it dumps it back into the blood. Here's a close-up. You can see here, here's the blood that's coming from the heart, and it's going here, and see all these cells right here? It's feeding all of these cells, and then the fluid that these cells are sitting in is called the interstitial space. It gets picked up by this green lymphatic vessels, and it goes back to the veins. So think about this. There's one circulation system in the body, and there's one lymphatic system in the body, and there's multiple cells, and all of these cells have the same DNA in them, but they all work very differently, and they all have different jobs, yet they're in one body. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Well, let's review and see what these ancient texts say. They say that the body of Christ, which is a body, all share one blood. This is written 1,500 years before William Harvey discovered the circulation of blood throughout the human body. Is that interesting? Okay. They all share in one baptism. That's the water. Written before we discovered the lymphatic system. Thousands of years before we discovered the lymphatic system. All right? We make up many different parts of the same body. That's 1 Corinthians 12. Again, thousands of years before Van Leeuwenhoek looked under a microscope. 1800s is when we had cell theory, when we realized that cells came from different cells. And then we have these interesting topics here, these interesting things from Paul that says that God dwells in us like a temple. How many of you heard that text before? Don't you know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? Now, what does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? Maybe we use that term sometimes, hey, you better take care of your body because it's not your own and something else is dwelling in it. Let's see if we can get a little bit more detail there. And that there's a law that's written inside of each of us. That's in Hebrews 10. All of this was written before 70 AD. So were these people just making things up? Because it seems as though a lot of what they were saying there has only recently been confirmed by scientific endeavors. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. So maybe we ought to be looking a little bit more deeply about how we're taking care of ourselves. And if we want to strengthen that third leg of spiritual health, maybe we also need to have physical health to be able to understand spiritual health. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? So we've been spending the whole weekend talking about one leg. And what I'm saying is that in order to strengthen those other two legs, it's really hard to do that unless you strengthen the first leg, which is physical health. So what is the temple? You know, when it's interesting, when Christ said, he says, tear down this temple and in 3 days I'll build it back. They thought he was talking about the temple there on the Temple Mount. He was pointing to himself. Right? So what was the pattern here of this temple that was there? It was based on the sanctuary temple from Exodus. And this is what it looked like. This is what the temple looked like. So here's my hypothesis. If in fact, this by the way, this pattern was not made up by man. This pattern was supposedly given to man by God himself. Is it possible that this very pattern is the same pattern that the human body is fashioned afterwards? Let's see if that's the case. Because that would be an amazing thing to see, that we would be able to find the pattern of man written in Exodus thousands of years before our scientific endeavors have been able to figure out what the pattern of man actually is. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right, so let's look at this. So this red box right here is called the altar of sacrifice. This is where basically the lamb or the animal was taken and slain. And what came out of the animal? Blood. So this represents blood. Okay? The next thing was this laver, which is where the priests would wash before they could go in to this holy place here. And this was filled with what? Water. And then you have this structure that has two chambers to it. It has an outer chamber and it has an inner chamber. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? All right. This is a golden lampstand. This thing does beta oxidation. It burns oils to produce energy. Interesting. This is the table of showbread. This is where you have glycogen storage. You have this thing sitting on a table, which is a platform that enables it to do all sorts of things. And then this is the altar of incense. This is where you basically take stuff and you burn incense and it creates a cloud of smoke. And then there's another veil, if you will. There's a barrier. There's a barrier here, but there's another barrier here before you get into the most holy place, and that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Does anyone know what was in the Ark of the Covenant? The Ten Commandments. So two tablets complementary to each other, upon which was written the code by the finger of God, correct? And there it was. Okay. All right, so I think we've got the pattern. Let's see if we see this pattern anywhere else. There's the outer court and the tent of meeting. By the way, this pattern is used over and over and over and over again in the Bible. For those of you who know your Bible stories that you learned in school, the same pattern happens. You have the blood on the doorposts of the Passover for the children of Israel. Then they go through the Red Sea crossing. That's the laver. it says there in Exodus 19 that they're supposed to be a light to the world. There's manna that's given to them. There's a thick communication, a thick cloud saying, praying. And then finally, they tell Moses to set up a barrier around Mount Sinai that nobody can go in except for him. And what does he get on the top of Mount Sinai? 10 Commandments. So there's a pattern right there. Okay, it's the same pattern that he seems to be using over and over and over again. I wonder if this pattern means something. How about Psalms 23? This is probably the most recognizable psalm in the Bible. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. So that's the shepherd, that's the sheep. He leadeth me besides the what? Still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness. This is the holy place. This is where righteousness was known to occur. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. That's where there's forgiveness of sin. Thou preparest the what? Table. There's the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with what? Oil. That's what's used there in the 7-branch candlestick. And then he sort of lets the cat out of the bag here, because you've got the 10 Commandments and the mercy seat, which sits right on top. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the what? House of the Lord forever. So David was not unfamiliar with this. He wanted to build the temple in Jerusalem. But it was not allowed to him. It had to go to his son Solomon because he was a man of war. So here we see one of the most famous psalms in all of ancient literature, and it's following what? The sanctuary pattern. Very interesting. How about the Lord's Prayer? You guys know the Lord's Prayer? All right. How about this? Thou Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. This is where the seat of God is in the most holy place forever and ever. Amen. So this is literally Christ teaching the disciples how to pray. And what's the pattern that he uses? The same pattern that he saved the children of Israel with, the same pattern that David wrote the 21st. I could do this on and on. I'm not going to bore you here. But this pattern is all throughout the scriptures. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Okay? Let's see if it is somewhere else. Oh, the creation of man. Wouldn't it be fascinating if the creation of man, if man was fashioned in the same way as this very same pattern? Then it might make sense when Paul says, what? Don't you know that your body is the... All right. I literally, folks, got this out of a science textbook. This is literally out of a science textbook. I did not tell the author to print it in this way, but what do you see here? I see the altar of sacrifice. That's the blood, and that's exactly what this is, the plasma volume. And then we go to the laver. What is this? This is the interstitial fluid. And then we go into the what? The intracellular volume, right? What they don't have here is a nucleus and a cytoplasm, but it's all in there. Do you see that? This is all of the body's fluids. Let's go through it. Here is the science textbook right here. See it? Science textbook. It's all right there. And here is our sanctuary. Do you see this? All right. So the altar sacrifice, this thing right here, blood gives life to everyone in the body of Christ. I want you to think about this. Let's pretend that all of us are cells in a body of Christ. In a body, and that body is the body of Christ. Let's just say we're all in a church, and there's other people out there that are a part. There's 38 trillion spots. Let's take one of those spots, okay? What would happen let's say you're in a part of the liver. I'm just making this up. You're one of the cells in the liver. And I take an artery that's going to that part of the liver, and I squeeze it off. I cut off the blood of Jesus going to you in the body of Christ. What's going to happen to you? You're going to die. Folks, this makes perfect sense to us. Why? Because of William Harvey. We have William Harvey in the 1600s that makes this perfectly clear to us. When they wrote this in the Holy Scriptures 2,000 years ago, they did not have William Harvey. And yet they wrote that it is the blood of Jesus Christ that allows you to live. Do you see what I'm saying here? This stuff that they wrote actually scientifically works out. The blood gives life to every cell in the body of Christ. And that's the first compartment. And here, out of a science textbook, what is the first compartment that we see in the body compartments of life? The plasma. Then, when it moves from the plasma, where does it move into? The interstitial fluid. What's the next place after that? It's the laver. It's the interstitial fluid. So that is the there. And then we move to the laver. The priest must wash the laver before going into or leaving the holy place. That's right there. The lymphatic system is the system in the body that cleanses. All of the cells in your body sit in the interstitial space. And they are cleaned by the lymphatic system. And they are shunted through lymph nodes so that the immune system can look for it, clean it, and then it dumps it into the vascular structure. In other words, it is the blood of Jesus Christ which cleanses our impurities through the lymphatic system. Literally. Nutrients from the blood delivers to the cells. Waste products from the cells are washed away into the blood. What's the next thing I'm going to go to? Well, if I look at this pattern, I'm about to go through a barrier, something that doesn't allow everything to come through. And where I'm going to go to next, oh, by the way, when Jesus was crucified, they put a sword into him. What came out? Blood and water. Isn't that interesting? Okay, moving along, we're going into the cell now. We're going into the actual cell. And the plasma membrane that covers the cell doesn't let everything in. It has proteins on the surface. Only small molecules like water and carbon dioxide and oxygen can diffuse through there, but larger molecules are not allowed to. There is, if you were, a veil around the cell that allows only certain things to come through, just like there is a veil here between there and the holy place. So what do we have? We have the table of showbread. Guess where the storage of glycogen occurs? In the cytoplasm of the cell. We have the altar of incense. That's where the prayers of the saints go up mixed with the righteousness of Christ, which is the incense. This is the vacuoles. This is where things go to be destroyed. Those vacuoles, or those lysosomes, are in the cytoplasm of the cell. What about the seven-branch candlestick? The seven-branch candlestick is what gives light to run everything in the holy place. Well, guess what's in the cytoplasm of the cell? Mitochondria. Mitochondria produces energy that allows all of the systems that occur in the cytoplasm to run. And the mitochondria uses beta oxidation of fatty acids to get energy. The seven-branch candlestick uses beta oxidation of olive oil, which is a fatty acid, to give off energy. Okay, so the holy place is analogous to the cytosol. All the same things in both places. In fact, the product of the mitochondria is something called ATP. Have you heard of this? ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. Okay? This is almost like the Holy Spirit in a sense. And Peter, in 2 Peter, it talks about how we have a more sure word of prophecy, of light that shineth in a dark place until the day dawn, and the day star arise in your hearts. Do you know what the Greek word there for this light that's arising there in your hearts? You know what the Greek word for that is? Phosphorus. It's exactly the same word that is used when the phosphate gets put onto the ADP to make it into ATP, which gives us energy. Isn't that fascinating? All right. Then we come next to another veil. And wouldn't you know it, when we go from the cytoplasm into the nucleus of the cell, there is a double plasma membrane that is very selective about what it allows to go in there. Because what is in the nucleus? DNA. And what is in the most holy place? The Ark of the Covenant. What's in the Ark of the Covenant? Folks, in the Ark of the Covenant are 2 tablets of stone that are complementary to each other, that is written on it by the hand of God. And that if you were to disobey those rules on the 10 Commandments, that is going to lead to disease, and that disease is going to lead ultimately to what? Death. In the nucleus, folks, are 2 complementary strands of DNA upon which is written the code written by the hand of God. And if you were to mutate that code, that mutated code leads to what? Disease, and ultimately to what? Death. We are literally sanctuaries. Our bodies are literally designed in the same pattern that was enumerated to Moses at the beginning in Exodus 20 to 25. And so when Paul says this, Paul is not saying this because of his own scientific understanding. He's simply inspired by the Spirit who was there when man was created. How else would you say this? This is purely coincidence? We discovered DNA was a double helix in 1953. And yet, the pattern has existed since the very beginning. Why do I say this? I have good ideas to think about this. This is David in Psalm 77, thinking about this pattern of the sanctuary and where he sees it used everywhere. He says, I will meditate also of all thy work and talk of thy doings. Thy way, O, of how many of thy doings? I will meditate of also of how much? All thy work. And talk of what? Thy doings. He's going to now sum it up. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? So think about this. That in essence, when God was creating man, he was creating man after a pattern that he would use to save man. Why would he do that? Because he wanted to show those people that could understand this, that before you have a problem, he already has the solution. You name it. Whatever problem that you have right now, that you know that when you walk out of here, you're going to have to pick that up, he already has the solution. The solution is already there. What is that solution for us? It's the plan of salvation, the altar of sacrifice, the laver, the golden lampstand, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the Ark of the Covenant. This is the pattern that he went through. Because Jesus Christ is crucified. He is the Lamb of God. He is the sacrifice of the altar of sacrifice. Then he was buried with him in baptism unto death, Romans 6:4. That's what the laver represents. Both of these things are in the outer court. They're both made of inferior metals in the sanctuary, and that signifies that both of these things would happen on earth. But then after he goes to heaven, the Holy Spirit is revealed on the day of Pentecost, represented by the 7-branch candlestick. The Holy Scriptures are given to us. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God, Matthew 4:4. And finally, we are now able to go and get forgiveness of sins. Okay? Revelation 8:3, the altar of incense. And then a day is coming. He says that every idle word in Matthew 12:36, every idle word that we say will come up in the day of judgment that he tells us. But fortunately, we have an advocate with the Father who is with us, and that is why the mercy seat sits above the 10 Commandments. He's not out to get you. He wants to save you. And that is the final part of the plan of salvation, where we have gone from one end of the campus to the other end of the campus. We have gone from being lost to actually walking in the presence of. And this is really the final culmination of all of this. To be able to understand this, folks, you cannot be dealing with diabetes. To understand this, folks, you can't have chronic disease that's impeding your mind. Your mind has to be able to be clear so you can understand these truths. And that is the reason why New Start is so important. Yes, you get another 10 years of life. But what is 10 years of life to eternity? It's nothing. We need to have mental clearness. The outer court, the tent of meeting, the earth, and heaven. So folks, the three-legged stool. Won't you start today to work on physical restoration? Because you cannot have spiritual or mental health unless you have physical health. You need at least of those three legs. All of these things are interconnected. And when you start to build one, the other ones will also build. So I have given you over the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday some very easy, no, maybe not easy, very simple, inexpensive, but yes, they do take planning to implement. And I guarantee you, if you start to implement them, your mind will become clearer, you will be able to feel better, and you'll be able to start looking at the other two legs so that you can finally have the three-legged stool that we've all been looking for, which is perfect health. And then you can tell others about perfect health. Rodney, I was going to ask you to come up, and I think what we have is questions and then some other information for our folks.
Indeed. Thank you so much. So once again, we want to encourage you to send any questions that came to your mind during this particular series of lectures today. If you can hold that.
Sure.
And just text your questions here, 951-330-4325. Dr. Schwelt, we already got one. Actually, this came in last night after we were done, and someone was meditating upon the lecture. They said, are sleeping pills okay if you're unable to sleep before midnight?
Yeah, so sleeping pills are basically a way of chemically putting yourself to sleep. It's obviously not going to be the solution to the problem. Here's the situation. This often happens this way, and a lot of my patients will endorse this as well, is you're sleeping fine at some point in your life, and then you find that you're not sleeping well. And what usually has happened in between is some great stressor has happened. Either you lost a job, or you lost a spouse, or maybe it's something good. You got a job, or you got married. And as a result of that, you couldn't sleep for a small time. But what's happened during that time is that you have adopted bad behaviors that has permanentized or perpetuated that inability to sleep. And so what we find is that sleeping medications are appropriate at the early portion of that to prevent those perpetuating things to occur. But once people are on sleeping medications for a long period of time, it doesn't help. And in fact, tolerance occurs where you need more and more and more of it to be able to fall asleep. So in a short I would say this. I am a sleep physician. I have patients with insomnia that come to see me. And the way that we try to attack this is to work on getting them to fall asleep, and we don't really try to taper off the medications at first. And the reason is because if I taper you off those medicines very quickly, you're not going to be able to sleep and you're not going to be able to get better. What we need to do is to get you more confident in your ability to fall asleep, and then when that starts to happen, then we start to taper off the medication. But if you actually look at the way these medications have been approved and the studies that have been done, you really should only be taking them for no more than 6 to 8 weeks and then tapering off those medications. Anything more than that just leads to tolerance.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. The next one here is a 104-degree fever equal for adults and children and babies?
104 is pretty high. That's about where I would start to treat that. For babies or for people on a lot of medications, that can lower the seizure threshold and cause a seizure to occur. So you have to be careful. There are certain medications that can lower your seizure threshold. There are others that will increase the seizure threshold, obviously anti-seizure medications. But what we don't want to have is seizures. And so in kids, we tend to see seizures happening more often. And so for a child, it actually may be worse.
Very good. All right, so this one came in at 6:15 this morning. So again, thank you for
Somebody slept on it.
Yeah, that's right, they were sleeping on it. What are the effects on people who are using energy drinks on a regular basis?
In fact, there was just a story that came out, some of you may have seen it, about a month or two ago. There was a young lady who was chronically drinking these energy drinks, and she basically went into cardiac arrest. This chronic exposure to these energy drinks, huge amounts of caffeine, can have an enormous impact, especially over a long period of time, and can, in certain people who are susceptible, have them go into cardiac arrest. So I would highly recommend getting off of those energy drinks.
Is there an alternative?
Yeah, if you are needing to drink something to have energy during the day, we need to dive down deep and figure out why you're not getting that energy. In many of these situations, it's probably because you're not getting enough sleep and you're not feeling like you have the abilities to do what you should be doing. Usually it's a combination of diets, the lack of sunlight exposure, and lack of sleep.
All right. Okay, this individual has several questions. Get ready. We'll take the first one here. Do we take vitamin D3 with K2, or does K2 cause blood clots?
So there is, so first of all, there is a difference between vitamin K and vitamin K2. There is some belief, first of all, vitamin K is a fat-soluble vitamin that helps with coagulation. It's the opposite of vitamin K is like Coumadin or warfarin that you may have heard of that makes your blood thin. That's not what we're talking about when they're asking about vitamin K2 with vitamin D. There is some concern that taking vitamin D will bring up calcium and it will cause calcification of the arteries. There's some data that seems to indicate that maybe vitamin K2 might prevent that from happening, and so it's advisable to take vitamin K2 with vitamin D. I would say to check with your physician if you're going to be taking vitamin D, if K2 is necessary. In the mainstream medical literature, there's not a recommendation to take K2 with vitamin D3 or D2. This is an understanding or a belief in the nutraceutical world.
All right, very good. Here's an interesting one. What is a good remedy for a cough?
A good remedy for a cough. You know, I am a pulmonologist, and in my clinic, this is probably 80% of the patients that I see. So a cough that has been going on for more than 4 weeks should probably be evaluated with a chest X-ray to make sure there's not some infectious or something worse going on, like a cancer or tuberculosis or things of that nature. And most of the time, that's not the case. The chest X-ray is clear. But I would say that 80 to 90% of a chronic cough is due to 3 things, okay? Number 1, it's either due to postnasal drip. That's where your nose is making a lot of secretions and it's dripping down the back of your throat. You're having to clear your throat quite a bit or cough it up. And that is the result of allergies or sinusitis, things of that nature. So postnasal drip, that's the first one. The second one is gastroesophageal reflux disease. So people who have a hiatal hernia or when they lay flat, their stomach starts to come up. One of the things that is beautiful about intermittent fasting is that if you follow intermittent fasting and don't eat after 5:30 at night, when you lay flat, when you finally go to bed, your stomach is completely empty, and you will notice that you will sleep much better if you have a susceptibility to having gastroesophageal reflux disease. What's going on is it's going up the esophagus, and it's bathing the larynx in a very acidic stomach fluid, which is going to cause you to have a cough. That's number 2. Number 3, the last one, is something we call cough variant asthma. You have asthma, but instead of wheezing like most people with asthma do, you simply cough. And so what I find myself doing a lot of when I have people who have cough is I make sure that they elevate the head of their bed that they're sleeping on. They may or may not be taking gastroesophageal reflux medication. I also would have them make sure that they don't have any down-feathered pillows, down-feathered comforters, pets in the bedroom, things of that nature that could cause a lot of allergic rhinitis. There are some sprays that you can get over the counter that have some steroids that might cool that area down. And so reducing all of these things can help with that sort of thing. Also, not eating at least 3 hours before laying down. But if you're doing intermittent fasting, that's not going to be a problem. So that is my sort of initial approach to people with a cough that's going on for weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we've got a lot of questions. Thank you, everyone. Again, if you have a question, just send it in. But we're going to have to go quick because they're coming in.
Okay.
So here we go. Is it better to eat turmeric, moringa, or beans whole, or can it be made a powder?
I don't have a lot of good explanation on that one. I would have to defer to a dietitian. I think that all of those sound good and things are in moderation. Generally speaking, though, the powder probably means that it's been processed, and it's probably better to have the whole food. That's probably the best.
Indeed. At what point do we let fever ride out before taking medication or going to see a physician?
Yeah, if it's been longer than 2 or 3 days of a constant fever, that's probably not a good thing. If they are susceptible, if they are starting to become lethargic, not interactive, or they're not, or they're becoming altered, that's also a red flag. So where would you allow a fever to be on? 102, 101, 102. They don't look toxic. They're not looking like they're getting ill. That's a fever that I would just let run its course.
All right. If one has osteoporosis, should they be lifting weights?
If someone has osteoporosis, you can have some low-level weights. I certainly wouldn't jump to something that's very heavy, but you do want some resistance training, and you want to strengthen. As I said, the bones are piezoelectric, so the more tension you put on the bone, the more the bone is going to reinforce itself. So start very light and work up from there.
Excellent. Can you just take a little more time to discuss protein intake a little bit more? Just go a little deeper for us.
Yeah, so protein is one of the 3 major foods that we eat: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Basically, everything falls into one of those 3 categories. And I think when we look at the standard American diet, we take in far too much protein. We don't need to take in that much protein.
How much do we need again? What's like a baseline?
I think they were, according to some of the studies, 10 grams I think it was per meal. But again, I'm not a dietitian.
Okay.
But in general, we take in probably too much. There's a lot of concern that we are not getting enough protein in our diets. And what the studies have shown from Stanford, for instance, that that's not as much as a concern as we thought.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Here's a great one. As adults, we can stop eating in the early afternoon, but what about kids? Can this schedule work for kids too?
It's interesting. Kids will do what kids will do. So they have smaller stomachs, and I think you probably have to have a little bit more leeway with kids, but eventually they have to be trained in the appropriate way, so it depends. There's kids that are 2 years old, and there's kids that are 13 years old, and there's a big difference between those. Certainly, kids that are smaller are going to need many more hours of sleep. They're also going to probably need to have more frequent feedings as well.
Yep, very good. Let's talk about melatonin if we can. How does taking a melatonin supplement impact our health?
Good question. So I'm not afraid of using melatonin as a supplement in very specific areas, but I don't recommend the routine use of melatonin as a supplement. And that is because really the amount of melatonin that we're talking about is a small amount that can actually have big changes in terms of circadian rhythm. I will use melatonin in certain sleep disorders. I will use melatonin in jet lag. But in terms of trying to fall asleep, the best type of melatonin is your own endogenous melatonin. The other problem with melatonin is that it's tasteless and it doesn't have any odor. And so when you buy it over the counter, you have to make sure that there's a third party that has validated that, in fact, this is actually in there.
All right, very good. Can you suggest anything to help reduce snoring for a better night's sleep?
Yeah, so if you are snoring, you really want to make sure that it's just snoring that you're doing and you don't have something more serious like obstructive sleep apnea. And unfortunately, people will say, oh, I don't have obstructive sleep apnea because of X, Y, and Z. I sleep fine. I don't snore. All of those are very poor excuses for not getting obstructive sleep apnea checked, because obstructive sleep apnea is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And in fact, many of you may not be getting good sleep because of obstructive sleep apnea, you should get that checked out. And it's very easy to do nowadays. You just go home with a device on your wrist, like a watch, and a thing over your finger, and it will tell you whether or not you have obstructive sleep apnea. Basically, what's happening is your airway is closing off at night, and you're not getting any air. You're not breathing, and your oxygen levels are dropping, and that's causing havoc with your cardiorespiratory system and your sympathetic nervous system.
Very interesting. If a person takes insulin once a day, is it better taken morning or evening?
I think that depends on a lot of things. I don't want to get into specifics because people can have what we call Somogy effect and dawn effect, and sometimes the long-acting insulin has a peak, sometimes it doesn't have a peak. I would say whatever works for you in terms of preventing hypoglycemic events. If it's truly a long-acting insulin, it shouldn't matter, but some of these like Lantus versus Glargine can have some differences with them. So that's a detail that I think probably needs to be looked at by their physician.
Okay, looks like we have about 5 more to go. I usually wake up hours later. Oh, wait. I can usually fall asleep easily, but I usually wake up hours later and find it difficult to fall asleep again for hours. What shall I do?
So this is a common complaint that I get, and what I would do in my clinic is I would do a deep dive. It's possible that they could be circadian shifted so that they fall asleep normally at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, but because of social things, they don't go to bed until 10 or 11. And then they go to bed very easily because it's right in the middle of when they should be sleeping. And then at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because their sleep is so shifted in the advanced direction, that they're just getting up at the normal time. If that's the case, I would have to look at shifting their circadian rhythm. Another possibility is they could simply be having sleep apnea. And so they go to sleep fine, and they're in the middle of the night, and then REM sleep comes in, which is where they have a paralysis of their body, which is normally should happen, and because of that, their airway collapses, they have worsening obstructive sleep apnea, and they wake up, and now they have a hard time falling asleep. So there's a multiple layers there that have to be pulled off, and in this type of thing, the best thing to do is to get tested for sleep apnea and then see a sleep specialist to get that worked out.
Fantastic. Here's another good one, and here we go. How much time should we allow between meals?
You really need to leave at least, as we saw there in the study, at least 2 or 3, 4 hours between meals. The stomach needs to rest. It does a tremendous job when it's digesting the food that you give it, and then you need to allow it to rest. I know a lot of people today in social media will say you should be constantly snacking and grazing. This is multiple small meals. When you do that, you exhaust the forces of your stomach. You really want to rest your stomach. So we want to compress the time that we're eating into a particular time of the day, but we also want to leave space between those meals to allow your stomach to rest.
Okay. A coworker was encouraging me to use a nicotine patch to decrease inflammation and respiratory issues like increased morning phlegm. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Nicotine is probably one of the most addictive substances known to man. I've had patients who have quit heroin, quit alcohol, but had a hard time quitting nicotine. And so if you are currently not on nicotine, the absolute worst thing that you could possibly do is to put a nicotine patch on you. I would definitely not advise that.
Should we measure how much we eat per meal, or should we eat until we get full?
Those are both interesting choices. I don't think we should eat until we get full. That's clearly that. I do think that there is some reasonable, rational reason to measure how much we're eating. However, I would say this. It can get to the point where you are so micromanaging what you eat that it gets to a point that it is such a performative thing with you that the benefits of you eating have been negated by the focus that you've put on the type of food that you have. Do a relatively good job, and then when you sit down to eat, just bless that food and know that that food is going to be good nourishment to you, okay? You can take things to an extreme so that you are so preoccupied with what you're doing that it actually wipes out any benefit that you're going to get from the actual food. So just be aware of that. By the way, you can do that not just with diet, you can do that with anything. Exercise, sleep, and that's the problem.
Thank you so much. All right, these two questions go together. What's better, to skip lunch or to skip dinner?
I think based on what we've talked about, since insulin sensitivity is better at the beginning of the day, that as you move away from that morning time, the insulin is becoming your body's becoming less and less sensitive. It would be better to eliminate dinner than it would lunch. Now remember again what I said. If you're used to having a big dinner, it may be better for you to start putting the size of the dish smaller and smaller. Let me tell you what I did. I used to have, when you go to the pantry, you pull out a plate, right? That plate is like one of these plates, right? Well, maybe not that big. It's about this big, right? And so my wife would, and there's something about that plate that you've got to sort of fill it with food so that there's no more empty part of that plate, right? There's just something psychologically about that. What I would recommend doing is instead of pulling out a plate, pull out a saucer or a smaller plate and fill that plate up. And so what you'll start to do is reduce the size of the meal that you're having at night, and then it'll be much easier to just sort of tune that down slowly and then sort of dial up the amount of calories that you're getting at the beginning of the day, instead of just cutting it out. Because when you cut it out, you're going to be miserable because the next night your stomach, which has been attuned to getting a meal at that time of day for years, is going to say, where is my food? And you're like, oh, I cannot do this. This is impossible. It's just not for me. Don't set yourself up for that kind of a disappointment. Make sure that you're doing things that are rational, that gets you to the point where you want to be.
Here's a kind of a follow-up question. Why do I wake up bloated even when I skip dinner?
Yeah, so it could be that, it could be a number of things. Bloating can be a sensation from gas. It could be what you're eating. It could be maybe, there's a whole bunch of things that it could be. What I would say is skipping dinner, one time could cause you to form the acids that it's ready to form because it's expecting a dinner, and you don't have it, and that's why you feel bloated. So again, another reason why I would start to look at where you want to be, look at your target, look at where your goals are, and start to work towards that slowly, imperceptibly, so that you get there in a much easier fashion.
Can excessive vitamin C be harmful?
Yes, by definition, excessive vitamin C is harmful. What could happen is if you take too much vitamin C, your kidney has to excrete this, and if there's so much, you can actually cause precipitation and get kidney stones. So just be aware of that. There's also a very rare interaction, which I'll just mention to you. If you're a diabetic and you check your blood sugars and you have an older glucometer, people who have been taking high IV doses of vitamin C, that ascorbic acid will actually cross-react with the reagent on the finger stick and make it look as though your blood glucose is actually higher than it is. And that can be a problem in hospitals, obviously, because if we have someone with a regular blood sugar that shows they have a very high blood sugar, and then we give them insulin to try to bring that sugar down, you can have a hypoglycemic event as a result. So it's a very small complication, but it's real.
Very important to note. All right, we're going to take 2 more minutes. The questions still come in. If we can't answer them all right now, we are planning follow-up programs, so don't worry. We will get to all the questions that have come in, even if we're not able to do it right here. Can a sinus infection be treated and cured with natural remedies?
So sinus infections, the sinuses are these caves behind your eyebrows and behind your cheeks here, and they're empty spaces, and bacteria can get in there and cause infections, and they find biofilm. It's very difficult to treat. Sometimes you have to be on antibiotics for 4 to 6 weeks. And those antibiotics are not only killing the bacteria here, but they're also killing the bacteria here in your gut. And I think there was a recent study that showed that just 1 day of antibiotic can have lasting effects on your gut microbiome for years. So people are learning that. They're trying to avoid antibiotics. Sometimes you can avoid them. Sometimes you have to weigh the risks and the benefits. There was a recent study that came out. I'm glad whoever asked that question. Pseudomonas is a very dangerous. It's a chronic bacteria. We see it in cystic fibrosis patients. They were able to show, Rodney, that when in the presence of infrared light, like the type of light we get from the sun, Pseudomonas would switch off its ability to make biofilm. A biofilm is something that it creates to protect itself from antibiotics. And in the presence of infrared light, there was a molecular switch that would turn off and it would no longer make biofilm, which means it would be susceptible to not only antibiotics, but the natural immune system. So, one of the things I advise my patients who have pseudomonal infections is to get out into the sun, because that can have a tremendous benefit. There's also some other data that they're looking at. How many of you have heard of Manuka honey? Okay, from New Zealand, right? Like the real stuff, right? There is a substance in Manuka honey that actually can break down biofilms as well. And I know an ENT doctor, I think from Ottawa, who came actually to speak for us here at Loma Linda about a decade ago, where they were actually mixing up Manuka honey slurries and putting it up into the sinuses. This was medical grade Manuka honey. I don't want you to try this with just regular honey because there's impurities in it, but medical grade Manuka honey to try to help with the healing of chronic sinusitis. So currently right now, ENT doctors will go up there and they'll open up the things that allow things to drain. If people have sinusitis, it's probably the result of chronic inflammation. I would go to an allergist, see if you're allergic to things. If you have cats, pets, down-feathered pillows, down-feathered comforters, try to reduce these things that might be causing issues, and then trying to get outside, getting fresh air, sunlight, drinking water, and seeing how things go. And then follow your physician's advice. Now, there's also other things that we talked about. What is one of the things that can help your body fight infections? Heat. So, breathing in steam, putting hot packs over there, increasing the temperature locally, or going into a hot tub. These are all things that you can do. And again, I would highly recommend, we had the QR code up there yesterday for the hydrotherapy thing. Look in there and see if there's an entry that Bruce has put in there for hydrotherapy. So the answer is yes, there are things that you can do.
Wonderful. We're going to take these few questions and then we'll have to finish for today. What is your opinion about veggie burgers as a protein source?
Yeah, veggie burgers basically are, there's different types of veggie burgers, right? There's the Beyond Beef, which are highly processed. There is Grand Burger, which has been around for decades, Worthington Foods. There was a recent study, and I don't have the reference, I'll have to find it, where they looked at people who had real meat versus the processed, and we don't like processed things, right? But this is processed veggie protein that makes into a burger versus other. And what they did was they compared the medical outcomes between unprocessed, pure, grass-fed, I'm trying to think of all the adjectives to make this as good as possible, beef, okay, versus processed, factory-made protein, tofu, veggie burgers that you put on a bun and eat it. The veggie burger was still better, okay? It was still better than the stuff, because what's actually in the beef? We talked about the new 5GC yesterday. Heme, blood. Let me just sort of back up a little bit here. When you read in the scriptures about how meat was to be handled, okay? Because we'll say, oh, it's a clean meat. Cow, it's a clean meat. But when you look into see actually what was the process in which a cow had to be slaughtered so its meat could be used, a calf to be slaughtered, all of the blood had to be drained out. Okay? There were some very specific rules that were made. So it's not just the fact that it's a cow that makes it clean, it's also how the meat was processed. That's not happening. Okay? When the cows are being slaughtered, they're being slaughtered with the blood in them, they're being cooked with the blood in them, and we're finding out, this is from the WHO, that the heme, the blood itself that you're cooking, actually can have problems and can cause oxidative stress and things in the body. That's not going to be there in the processed vegetarian food. But again, here's the rule that I would say. I would use the processed protein to get you away from the more dangerous thing, but eventually, what direction are we moving in? Whole food, plant-based diets. Okay?
And with that, we'd like to invite you to our cooking program where we will make our own veggie burgers.
There you go.
That are not with protein isolates of all the different kinds. So, all right, we'll take this as our last one today. Any advice for menopausal women with regard to using HRT and diet tips?
Oh, it's so interesting that you asked me that question because my wife is getting up to that age and we're having the very same questions. And you will see this back and forth. I still don't know for myself what the right answer is. And I think it's an individual decision. Look, it used to be 20, 30 years ago, probably about 30 to 40 years ago, that scientists were very excited about using hormone replacement in women. And why was that? It was because we had studies that showed retrospectively that women that were put on hormone replacement therapy did better in terms of cardiovascular disease, did better in terms of stroke, and all sorts of things. But here's the problem. The problem is that all of those were retrospective studies. And the studies that we use to show that something works are not retrospective studies. They are randomized placebo-controlled trials that go prospectively. I've shown you studies like that when we talked about sunlight and things of that nature. Well, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there was something called the National Women's Health Trial. And this was going on all over the country where they were doing just this. They were taking women and randomizing them to getting hormone replacement and not getting hormone replacement. Now, there was some criticism about how they were doing it, but the bottom line is that they had to stop the study early. And the reason why they had to stop the study early was because women were being harmed in the hormone replacement group. In other words, this was something that was really astonishing because here was something that the retrospective data saying was beneficial, but the prospective data was saying that it was not beneficial. Now, there were some, and I don't want to get into all the details, they were saying, well, maybe they should have used this type of estrogen instead of that type of estrogen. Anyway, there are now people that are rethinking that rethink, saying that there may be a role for estrogen replacement in some women. Again, this is a complicated question. I'm not able, at this point here on this stage, to give you a blanket statement that is very clear about estrogen replacement in you specifically, and I would highly recommend that you talk to your doctor about that because it's complicated. Do you have a risk of breast cancer? Do you not have a risk? Have you had clots before? Do you not? It's a complicated question, and I still think that answer really hasn't been answered, but I hope I answered the reason why I can't give you an answer because it is complicated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schwelt. We really appreciate that. I want to encourage all of you to get to know MedCram as well. Can you talk about MedCram just a little bit as we finish this portion?
So MedCram, when I was teaching, a PA student came to me and really liked my teaching style and says, you know, we should put a YouTube channel where we could teach everybody with YouTube. And this is the time when Khan Academy was coming out with theirs. So we started to do that. And so at first it was for people in the healthcare industry who were students that wanted to learn. But we were doing such a good job, Kyle and I, about how to describe these things and to do it in a very easy to understand way that it wasn't just students that were looking at that, but everybody with their condition. So if you go to YouTube and you go to MedCram, you will see a channel that comes up with a host of videos. During the pandemic, we kind of switched gears a little bit. More people wanted to learn about COVID and the pandemic and what they should be doing, so we made some videos there. And that's when we really started to get into talking about this, because for a while there, we didn't know what to do. People had all of these ailments, and like, what do we do? And that's when we started talking about sleep and hydrotherapy and things of that nature, and we showed the evidence for it. So people can go online and say anything they want to, right? The key is, do they have evidence to back it up? And hopefully, what I hope that you've gained from this talk on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is I'm not just up here telling you what I think is right. I'm showing you what the evidence shows, and that can give you confidence to do what is right.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Schwelt, for your
Thank
time.
you, Rodney.
We have really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Can I just use that for a second as we close? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Again, we really want to thank you for coming out, but this is not the end. Unlock Your Health is really just the beginning. So I want to again highlight our follow-up programs. So if you have not been here and today's your first day, please take your phone out and take a picture of that QR code or respond to the email that you will receive today. Everyone who's registered will receive an email, and we will have a survey because we would like to know what you are interested in the follow-up. And we are planning to have several things. I'll highlight a few of them just after she grabs that picture. But we're having a survey. Again, this is put together by Health Education Resources, and we want to help you with the next step. So we are planning to have a monthly New Start Club. So far, from the responses that we have received, this is definitely going to happen, okay? So we are definitely going to do a New Start Club. So look forward to that. The other option is for a children's health club. We do believe that kids can and should be healthy, all right? So if you think that that is something that would benefit your family, make sure to check that off on the survey. Then we also have our vegetarian cooking school. And this also had a good number of people, but not enough yet. So if you're really interested, we need more votes for this one if we're going to really do it. All right, then we have the Best Way program. This one is really focused on weight loss. It's a phenomenal program, really excellent to help to eat for health and lasting results, and really gives you some good motivation and to set goals. It's a fantastic program. We also are willing to do Diabetes Undone. This is a more specialized program for those really struggling with diabetes, and we can run this program if there is a good amount of interest with that. The Natural Remedies Seminar is definitely going to happen because that one was a tie for the New Start Club. So for sure, we are going to be planning a Natural Remedies Seminar, and it will be amazing. We're going to learn the hydrotherapy, the herbal treatments, the natural immune support, and all those different kinds of things. It's going to be great. We have the Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program for those of you who would like to have peak mental performance and really excel in this area of life. We are willing to host this as well. And then what the Bible says about health. There was a good number who were interested so far, so we will plan on doing this as well. This had a good number of interests, but if you have not done the survey yet and you think this would be something you would like to do, let us know. And of course, we have Bible prophecy. And as I mentioned, I'm a pastor, and I really love prophecy. And if we look around the world and see what's happening today, it's an amazing time to be alive. And so if you're interested in knowing more about the signs of the times, the prophetic books of Daniel and Revelation, God's plan for our future, and about Jesus' second coming, make sure to check that out. I'll put the QR code once again up there, so if any of you need to scan that, please feel free. Again, we want to thank you for coming. As we close our session, I'd like to pray for you and for your families, and then encourage you to grab some literature on the way out, and we will look forward to continuing our communication and our journey to improve our health together. So please bow your heads as we pray. Father in heaven, thank you very much for this wonderful weekend of unlocking our health. Thank you that Dr. Schwelt was able to be with us. I know he is very busy. I have seen him checking his phone. I know that there are emergency cases that come up that he's had to deal with, and yet you have allowed the opportunity for him to be with us. So I pray for him and for his family. Bless them. And be with each person who has come. You know the reasons why we are here. You know the difficulties that we each face, the challenges in our lives, and we want to commit them to you now. We ask that you'll keep us safe as we go to our homes, and that you will bring us back together as we continue our journey of health and healing. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Oh, by the way, we have a little more Ezekiel 4:9 bread, and so if you'd like some of that, see Gia on your way out. Thank you. God bless.